Good, so let's actually get on going. So welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Patterns and Practices / SharePoint Dev Ecosystem, the monthly community call, and this is the February 2018 edition. So basically, just to be super clear and clarify what this is all about, this is the end-to-end SharePoint development community call, which we have from SharePoint engineering side towards the community. There is no other, basically there's no other initiatives or no other things related on SharePoint Dev than our SharePoint PnP. Which is hopefully pretty clear for the community already at this point. Now, today we have quite exciting agenda. So we'll start again for me doing a quick monologue for hopefully 15 minutes. I'm trying to improve on that one. And then we have 3 great demos from the internal and external community members. So Paulo will start and have a preview on the upcoming third-party web API and additional craft scope support. And apparently, Paulo, you're mentioned twice in the agenda, so that's my typo there. But now this is something which I actually previewed already in the January 2018 monthly community call, which was like 3.5 weeks ago. And there was unfortunate delays on getting this released and getting this out, so we haven't been able to push it out from a SharePoint engineering perspective. Right now, however, it looks to be in matter of hours or days to get this one out. So we're getting super close on getting this one out, rather than last time we were planning to get it out, but there was unexpected issues which we found into. Now, the second demo after Paulo will be then AC from Voitanos doing a quick introduction on Office 365 CLI. Like mentioned in the messenger or the Iron window, there is actually a separate conference and separate webcast from Waldek and AC on that topic slightly later in the community, and you can find all of that information from the social media. Now, and the last one, there's Bert Janssen having another look on the APIs to modify modern pages content and controls. There has been a lot of improvements in here, and we're pretty excited to actually be super close to support, I would say, almost all of the scenarios within the modern pages. So basically, you're able to truly export, for example, a web part which has a dependency on an image on a site, and we are able to kind of tackle all of those assets and all of that stuff within the modern pages. But I'll let Bert to go on details on what's actually supported and what actually can be done related on modern page modification. This is an API which is community-driven API through the PnP community. Now, in the SharePoint engineering, if I put my SharePoint engineering hat on, there we go, as you can see. Oh, there's no video on. In the engineering side, we're looking into improving the API support on the modern pages as well, but we do not have an exact timeline for that. And no idea what happened there, but apparently we no longer present our presentation. So let me actually get that one back there online. That was strange. Yeah, it might be called Skype. That was slightly weird. Okay, so you can probably see what I'm sharing, right? Just confirming that. Somebody can confirm that in the Iron window. Excellent. Thank you, AC. So, and let's see if we have some time for the QA session. Typically, the monthly community calls from a SharePoint side, these are pretty busy calls, and that's why that was the original reason why we actually started 2 separate bi-weekly community calls as well. So there's a bi-weekly community call around SharePoint Framework, which concentrates on the client-side development on things, and then there's a bi-weekly community calls around, so to go, SharePoint General Dev. And this happens on every single Thursday. The next call, for example, for SharePoint Framework is around 15th of February, so this week's Thursday, within 2 days, and the general and at the SharePoint Dev General call, bi-weekly call, is on the following week. So every single Thursday at 5 p.m. we do have a community calls, and in those calls we're, how would I put it, more interactive. Hopefully we have more time for Q&A. This monthly community calls are more a summary on what has happened within the past month. Now, and obviously, please take advantage of the community channels as well. As an example, the SharePoint developer group under the Microsoft Tech community, rather than sending me a random email trying to get you a help. I'm just looking in my inbox, which is filling up from this morning again. No offense for people asking help, and I would love to be able to help, but I absolutely need to also concentrate to my work, and individual emails do not scale. So that's why we have Microsoft Tech community. That's why we have other channels where also we from engineering actually prefer to go and answer, because then other people can see the answer to your question as well. So please take advantage of all of those things. Now, quick summary on the January numbers. These are pretty cool. Obviously, super cool for Microsoft employees. You don't necessarily care that much, but in the YouTube channel, it's nice to see that people are finding our YouTube videos useful. So we had 156,000 minutes of YouTube watch time. It's a pity that it would feel bad to enable advertisement in this YouTube channel, so we're not going to do that. And then on the unique visitors on the GitHub site, we had 29,000 unique visitors, which had 148,000 views on the GitHub. So it's great to see also the growth in the GitHub site, so which shows that people are more and more open on at least using the samples and finding the GitHub, because there's a lot of valuable samples and solutions for you to take advantage. In the docs.microsoft.com, we actually jumped roughly 25% in the views comparing to the December, which is super high and excellent, because it also shows that apparently that we have decent amount of content in our documentation for SharePoint Dev. Now, we do know that SharePoint Dev documentation can be always improved, and that's a massive challenge for us as well, to keep all of the old material up to date and then keep on adding new content which would be relevant for day-to-day work for you. So, but we will be working on that one as we move along within the spring more and more. Now, on the PnP reusable component usage, we had 8.4 billion HTTP requests going through PnP core component, PnP PowerShell, and PnP JS core. And it was used; those components were used in our more than 9,000 tenants, which is pretty cool. We'll seem to be breaking the 10,000 tenant almost this month, or latest in March, and 10 billion HTTP requests, which is mind-blowing for a simple reusable components, which we started building back in 2014. Most used capability, provisioning engine, which actually spiked this month quite heavily. And my personal assumption is that this is related on the announcements and GA of the site design. So people started using the site design, and then they find the guidance around site design and how to do extensibility with site designs, which is showing how to do PnP, PnP level of improvements on the provisioning. Sure, there's other provisioning engines out there as well, and please compare and make a wise choice what do you want to use within your solutions. Now, moving on to other topics. So, reminder on the documentation location. So, if you're not aware of this one yet, I will keep on repeating this every single call. So, all of our SharePoint development documentation is in the docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint/dev or AKMS SP Dev Docs, and this will be the location where we have already consolidated all of our MSDN active MSDN documentation. We could keep on evolving these here as well. We do have a small challenge that there's a lot of material from the adding timeframe, which we need to go through and modify and polish, and we will be dropping some of those materials away to make sure that the information is relevant. But we do have awesome set of scenario-based guidance coming up quite soon, which will concentrate on how to make business solutions or certain scenarios enabled in SharePoint Online or in on-premises. So that guidance should be out within the next monthly community call. There's a quick question from Kevin around AKMS SP PnP. Technically, so that's our landing page for PnP, but there's a interesting development around the SharePoint PnP, because why do we have a SharePoint PnP page and then we have a separate SharePoint Dev page? It doesn't make any sense. So most likely what will happen, and this haven't yet been decided when it will happen, we will have a simple modernized new SharePoint developer landing page underneath the Office, and over there you will find all of the familiar PnP samples, videos, and everything else, because it doesn't make any sense to have a separate page for SharePoint Dev and a separate page for SharePoint PnP. It is exactly the same thing. No, so that's the reason why AKMS SP PnP might be then redirected to the new page whenever we get that one out. There's certain delays around that one. Now, the second thing what I want to quickly mention before we go to the monthly summary is please, if you find an issue, if you have problems, if you have a question, technical question, or especially if you have run into issues around SharePoint framework or APIs or development topics around SharePoint, please go to our SP DevDocs issue list, submit an issue, rather than pinging people in Twitter, which is fine. You can ping a person in a Twitter, but Twitter has nowadays 280 character maximum. So you can't really explain what's the issue in 280 characters, even though that is double by the 140. So the issue list is really for you to have an easy way for reporting issues to us if they're development related issues, and then we are asking certain things and additional details on the template as well. And this is replicated, all of the issues which is created in here is replicated to our Visual Studio Online, to our engineering, and we have twice a week triage where we go them through and prioritize them based on the priorities. Now, we do know that there's a lot of issues which seems to be that we haven't replied on them yet, or why don't you actually, this is an important thing for me. We're trying as fast as we can, and we will absolutely go them through as fast as we can. So at least twice a week, all of the new issues, and then based on the prioritization, we are addressing the old ones as well. Now, moving on things. Quick update on the roadmap. This is the February 2018 edition. This actually, unfortunately, hasn't been changing that much since the New Year. So we've been kind of waiting for, obviously, site designs and extensibility point went live, and that's now G8, which is a brilliant thing. You can use site designs and site scripts in production, so that is now production available. The more Microsoft Crash support in SharePoint Framework is now, unfortunately, originally was planned to be late December, then January. Now we're already in February, but now it seems to be getting live in a matter of hours or days. So now we're super close, and we seem to be going live with that one. I'm watching my email on the latest situation on that, so we're super close, but can't give you an exact date because we don't want to promise you something which we can't keep. So pretty soon that's going to happen. Hub site and Hub APIs, we're currently working on a documentation on that one, so you will see those live relatively soon. The PowerShell commandlets are already out in the previous PowerShell release. There will be some changes on them. The functionalities do not yet work until we enable them for you for preview usage, and Groupify API is coming pretty soon as well. Now, UserVoice, few entries and a few notice on this one. I just wanted to keep this one in the SharePoint dev this monthly call as well, just to make sure that we are 100% aware of the UserVoice entries, and we're looking into addressing many of these within the upcoming year. Now, we're looking into doing more on the content management side, ECM side during this year. We're also looking into extending SharePoint Framework, and there's quite a lot of logical things here which we absolutely 100% need to address. This list itself didn't actually change from the past month. So in January, the items in the list were exactly the same, except that number 2 and 3 has been flipped. So the support for single-page application in SharePoint Framework is now number 2 with 429 votes. And the number 3 item went slightly down. I'm not going to deep dive on all of the status on this from a timing perspective, but trust me, we are closely looking into these items when we're trying to address them as well. More votes in an item means that it has a higher priority. And yes, we also understand the frustration what you might have if you've been asking something for almost a year already, or even 2 years, and you want it and you can't make things happen unless it's there, but it's also a challenge from an internal prioritization perspective. So there's certain internal priorities which are always driving our thinking and our actions as well. One thing maybe to mention from here, the support for .NET Core with CSAM, that's something what we've been closely looking, for example, in the PnP team, so community side, so what would that mean? And also in engineering, we're closely looking into how we could potentially make that happen, because there's a growing demand and ask for having a client-side object model also in a .NET Core. More on all of this, obviously, in our community calls. Cool. February 2018 summary, quick summary on things. So on SharePoint Framework side, we had a new release of the new reusable SharePoint Framework controls. There was quite a lot of new field controls from Alex from SharePoint list, and a few other adjustments. There's quite a lot of samples which were upgraded to SharePoint Framework 1.4 version, and there's quite a lot of updated documentations on that. On the PnP components, there was new PowerShell commandlets added. These were related on site designs and site scripts, and so manipulating them. There's an updated support for new 2018-01 schema, which is now the default schema on the PnP Provisioning Engine, and the PnP JS Core is looking into having the original official release under the PnP scope, and more on that one from Patrick as part of the SharePoint framework community calls. There was also SharePoint site designs went G8 pretty recently, last week. I think so, last week, yeah. Office 365 CLI is now version 1.0.5. We'll see, have a look on that one as well today, and also a new version of client-side object model, which had the execute query async method, which is actually pretty cool. If you missed our last Thursday's community call, Radi Atanosov actually showed how to use the client-side object model and execute query async method in .NET to have async experience, and what does it actually mean. Super cool call, and there was a lot of other demos there as well. Now, some of the webcasts and videos, not going to spend too much time on this one. We're listing, obviously, all of the lists, including these. I'm going to go one step back. Are mentioned if you go to devtodos.com/blogs. There is the February summary, which is listing all of these assets which we're having on the slides. And also in our slide share, we have already the slides available if you're interested on them. Now, like I said, we had four different webcasts during January. Slightly again, slightly always depends what we count for the previous month. We had a new PnP short video around how to migrate from SPFx to PnP at PnP scope JS version, and there was quite a few community call recordings from a video side. Now, on the community side, there was a lot of people once again helping us on this journey, and we absolutely appreciate your contributions, because you are helping this community to grow and this community to be successful by helping the other people to be successful as well, by contributing your time, either by helping them on questions or reusable samples or reusable controls and whatever is your, or actually community call demos. That's one way of contributing for the community as well. So thank you for your contributions. And I do apologize, I'm not going to mention all of you one by one, because we would simply run out of time from this call. But these are the companies, and this is the most companies which we have had ever in the PnP in the company list, and these are the companies which we have a permission to show their logo as part of our monthly communication. So these are the companies where their employees have been given permission to contribute towards the SharePoint Dev ecosystem and the open source initiatives around SharePoint Dev. So thank you for all of these companies for their contributions towards the community as well. Thank you. Now, good. From a Microsoft side, we had a quite big list as well. There's new people in this list. I'm not going to again mention all of you. And I noticed just that I just renamed Sean Squires as On Quires. So I do apologize, Sean, on that, if Sean is on a call. Somehow magically missing an S from the last or third last name on the list. But a lot of people actually contributing from the Microsoft side. So thank you for your contributions. Now, let's move into the demo side. I do apologize. Well, not too bad. 18 minutes past. So first one, as a demo person, would be Paolo Pialorsi. And I didn't have really time to watch on the iron window when I was presenting, so I'll jump on back and if there's any questions which nobody answer. But Paolo is going to take the lead. And let's have a look on the upcoming third-party API or the additional graph scope and how it works in practice within the SharePoint framework implementations. You can start sharing, Paolo.
Yeah, thank you, Vesa. I'm still in the presentation.
Absolutely. You don't have to ask permissions on that because all good.
It is loading, so let me know when you see my screen so that we can start the demo.
Loading and 3 dots. And a nice circle moving around, and I got your screen, so we should be good.
Okay. Cool, thank you. So now we are in the Workbench, and now we will see a full round trip of development for a client-side web part built using SharePoint Framework, which can consume the Microsoft Graph with a custom set of permissions set from an authorization perspective. So first of all, let me show you the client-side web part, which is the one you already saw, last month when we played with the internal preview of this new capability. But pretty soon, as Vesa said, it's a matter of most likely of hours or days, you will be able to play with your own hands on top of this new capability. So this client-side web part simply allows you to search for for user based on the username in the directory of users that you have in your tenant, and it is using the micrograph to search for the user. So if I search for user 1, which is one user that I have in my tenant, I can search and I can get back the user with his properties like the email address and the user principal name directly from the micrograph, using any of the options that we have in the SharePoint framework, and which we will see pretty soon when we will move to the code side of this demo. So in order to create a client-side web part with SharePoint framework and being able to make a query against the micrograph with the new capabilities, you will simply need to have in the package solution of your SharePoint framework solution, the declaration of the WebAPI permission requests that you want to have in order to run your solution. And keep in mind that this set of permissions that you will need is at solution level, not at web part level. So at the solution level, I'm declaring that this solution will need to have access to the micrograph, and specifically, I will need to have access using the user.readbasis.all permission, as well as I need to access still the micrograph with the calendars.read permission. By declaring these settings in the package solution of my SharePoint framework solution, I will be able later on from the admin UI of SharePoint Online to allow, to consent or to accept, to give those permissions to a service principal which will be shared across all of the solutions in my tenant. Moreover, from a development perspective, once I have declared the permissions that I need for my application to run, let me move to the source code of my client-side web part. I can consume the micrograph as long as I have the permission that I requested. I can consume the micrograph using two different techniques. The first technique is the one based on the AAD HTTP client type, which is a new one which will be introduced in the SharePoint framework, in the upcoming new release of the SharePoint framework client-side libraries. And the AAD HTTP client object can be created using the service scope of the current context, as well as the target resource that I want to consume, which in my case is the graph.microsoft.com, so the micrograph. Using this object, you can consume any API that you have registered in your Azure AD tenant. So it can be the micrograph as it is in my demo, but it can be any third-party API that, for example, you registered in your tenant or someone else, an ISV gave to you to register in your own Azure AD tenant. Once you have the AAD HTTP client object created, you can simply make an HTTP request using any of the available methods like GET, POST, or any of the other available methods, HTTP verbs, I mean, and you will target the URL that you want to consume. So in this example, I'm using the graph in version 1.0. I'm using the collection of users. I'm selecting few properties of every single user, filtering the user based on the given name of the user or the surname or the display name. So this is just a REST-based and Open Data Protocol-based query that I'm running against the user's endpoint of the micrograph version 1.0. Once I have my JSON response, I simply go through all of the items in my response and I do the data binding using the React component for the rendering. But this is not really important right now. What is really important is the AAD HTTP client object. Another option that I have is to use, if my target is the micrograph, the MSGraph client type, which is yet another one that we have in SharePoint Framework, we will have in SharePoint Framework, and we can use this one to consume the micrograph using a Fluent API. In fact, as you can see, using an instance of this type, I can simply say that I want to access the collection of users, so the API for the users. I want to use the version 1.0 of the graph API. I want to select these properties of the target objects, and I want to filter the result based on the same filtering criteria that I was using before in the AAD HTTP client object. Once I have got back my JSON response, as before, I can go through all of the items and I can push them in a collection which will be used for data binding in the UI. So, Once you have created such a solution in which you use either the MS Graph client or the AAD HTTP client, and once you have declared the permissions that you will need to run your application, you can bundle your solution, you can package the solution, and you will get back the SPPKG file ready to be uploaded in the app catalog of your tenant. So let me go to the app catalog. Here it is. And let me show you what will happen during the full round trip of the solution deployment. So let me simply drag and drop the package in the app catalog. And as you will see, we will have the classic prompt UI to select if we want to deploy or not the package. And because this is a tenant-wide deployment, we can enable the tenant-wide deployment of this package. And moreover, here in the lower part of the screen, you can see, please go to the Service Principal Permissions Management page to approve pending permissions. It means that SharePoint Online realized that there are some custom permission requests in the package, and so an admin will need to approve those permission requests. So let's do that. Let me deploy the package, and let me go to the admin UI of SharePoint Online. We need to go to the new admin UI, which is under preview right now, and under the API management section, as you can see here, we have an already approved permission for a custom API, as well as 2 new permission requests which are pending approval for the Microsoft Graph for the 2 permissions that I showed you in my package solution.json file. So I can select the first permission, for example, let's say this one, and I can approve or reject the permission request. As you can see here, I have a bunch of detailed information about who is requesting the permission and when it was requested and so on and so forth. And if I'm okay, I can approve this permission request. Moreover, I can also approve the second permission request, so the one for the calendar thread. Again, I can select and I can click the approve button. Before doing that, I want to tell you and want to share with you that you can do almost the same stuff using PowerShell, if you like, so that you can automate the full process. So you will simply need to connect to the SPO service, providing the URL of the admin URL of SharePoint Online, and then you can get the already assigned permission grants. I'm already connected with my target tenant right now. So I can get the permissions that I have already granted. And for example, we can see the custom one for the user impersonation, as well as the user.readbasic.all, which I just approved. I can also see that I have some pending requests, like the one, or sometimes it fails, but it is still under preview. So when you make the request, you can see that you have 1 or more pending approvals for pending permissions, and here we have 1. And we can, for example, approve the permission using PowerShell, or we can deny it, or we can even revoke a permission that we already assigned. Whatever will be the tool that you want to use, once you have approved the permission needed by your application, you will be able to use the permissions in your client code just using the AAD HTTP client object or the MS Graph client object. And in fact, here, what I'm doing is exactly using those permissions through this client-side web part. Moreover, whenever you approve a permission request, if you go into the Azure Active Directory Management UI of your tenant, you will find a SharePoint Online Client Extensibility application registered. And if you dig into that application, and if you have a look at the permissions of that application, you will be able to see what are the permissions applied. And this application is a kind of service principal which is used at the tenant level to configure all of the permissions that all of the SharePoint framework solutions in your tenant will have. In fact, the permission that you see in this UI are those assigned, those approved for any SharePoint framework solution running in your tenant. So it's not something tied to any specific package or solution, but once you approve a permission at tenant level, that permission will be available to all of the SharePoint framework solutions running in your tenant. Of course, you can also remove a permission if you don't like it, and it's up to you. You have the web UI or the PowerShell-based UI to manage those permissions. That said, I think that now we have a full round trip, fully working round trip. We can fully play with the solution. And just to show you one more thing before leaving the stage to my colleagues, if I make a search using either the HTTP client or the Microsoft Graph client, you will see the first time a pop-up dialog window popping up because DIL.js is the library used under the cover to make the open authorization handshake. And moreover, if we press F12 and we go in the application, in the session storage, you can see that we have a token, an access token for the graph. And here, if you want to debug, if you want to dig into the details, you can just extract the access token and see what's inside the access token. One last thing, by default, at least right now, by default, all of the client-side web parts, even if they don't have any permission approved or assigned, they will have a custom out-of-the-box graph permission, which will be the users.read.all. So if you simply need that permission, you don't really need to make an explicit request in the package solution.json file. While if you want to have any other kind of permission, like in my example, you will need to make an explicit request and you will have to wait for the approval for those permission requests. That's it on my side. I think it is really exciting and cool, so I'm really looking forward to having this capability in every tenant under preview. Anything else, Vesa, that you want to add?
Thank you, Paolo. Just to quickly reiterate the questions, because we're still, well, not taking too much time on that. So there's quite a lot of questions. One thing to understand, and Paolo, you mentioned that pretty well. So first of all, there is a default permission, at least for now. This is still preview. The new Graph client is replacing the old Graph client. So that's considered deprecated in the latest versions of the code, and that's also marked into API. All of the settings, what we also see here, are not solution specific, and that's really important to understand. So any other web part which is requesting an access token using these APIs or hitting an access token or getting the access token into implementation is getting all of the other access and permissions as well. So what you're configuring here is end-to-end what's actually supported for SharePoint Framework solutions in your tenant. It's not only for one solution. If you also remove the solutions, we do not remove the permissions because that would be just insane. It would cause you problems with that. But we have good documentation coming up on this one. And it will be released in exactly the same time as the packages and the server side. On the server side, obviously we need to enable the flights. You do not see that admin setting yet within your normal tenant because we have explicitly, well, it's not been yet enabled. It should be lighting up relatively soon, and obviously before the functionality is available. But I think that's it for this one. ACE, I think you can start sharing.
Cool. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good, all good. You can start sharing because what? Sharing is caring.
You should be sharing now.
Okay. Yes, it is. Loading 3 dots. Give me a second. I'll just confirm when I got it. Yep, and got it. We should be then good to go. Yep, all good.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thank you. Hey, everybody. So I want to just take a few minutes and talk a little bit about the Office 365 CLI. I tried to do a demo of this a couple webinars ago, and I failed miserably. I'm trying to do it on the fly, so we're going to have a better experience today, at least we hope. First, if you want to find any information about the Office 365 CLI, the best place to go is this link that you'll see right up here at the top of my screen in the browser, just sharepoint.github.io/Office365 CLI. So you're probably wondering, what is this thing? So the idea is that, today we have ways to interact with SharePoint and Office 365 that are provided both by Microsoft and the PowerShell the SharePoint Online PowerShell module, as well as from PnP. We have the SharePoint PowerShell as well. But what we've done here is that the community has built another project called the Office 365 CLI with the motivation of giving us a way for us to do the same kind of interaction that we can do with PowerShell, but being able to do it in other platforms as well, such as Mac OS or Linux. So this is a classic command line interface I'm going to show you that's all built on top of Node, so you have to have Node installed. It is a PnP initiative that is really spearheaded by Waldeck Mastercars. So I'm trying to be Waldeck for the day for you today, which is a very tall order. The idea is that is built by the community, driven by the community, for the community. So the whole sharing is caring thing is very very core to this. So we have monthly drops of the CLI, monthly production drops, and in between we also have production or beta drops as well. You can find out how to get either one on the documentation on the website. So choose either one. And the way it works under the covers is that it's going to have you authenticate. I'm going to show you this in just a second. It's going to have you authenticate into using your Azure AD or Office 365 credentials. And we primarily use the REST API, either the Office 365 or Azure Active Directory or SharePoint Online REST APIs to do all of our interaction. That's primary. But there are some instances where the REST API does not have an endpoint exposed for what we need to be able to do. So similar to how the PowerShell guys do it, we call the CSOM endpoints directly, which is not really a hack because these different endpoints are all published protocols by Microsoft. So we just mimic the call that CSOM is end up going to make. So the way you're going to go about getting this, I'm just running on one version of Node on my machine. I use a thing called Node Version Manager to make it easy to jump around. To install this, I would just say npm install -g, and then, or for go global, and then I'm going to specify the PnP/Office 365 CLI tool here. So it's going to go ahead and download it. I'm going to save us a little bit of time, and I'm going to switch over to another version of Node that I have that actually has the CLI running. So if I can just do this, we'll see a version of the CLI is going to be listed here. Now the best place to go to get, I was waiting for this to finish up, but while, there we go. So you can see it's listed right up here. I've got the Office 365 CLI version 0.5 installed. Don't worry about the 0 being the first thing in the version numbers. This is classic Semver notation. So we are at a V1 or however you want to call it. We are at generally release, so you feel comfortable using this stuff. How do I go about getting help for this thing? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to jump in and actually start using it. So the way you do that is you're going to use it in an immersive mode. So I'm going to go to Office 365. And what that's going to do is then open up this immersive mode. So the first thing we do is I'm going to say, let's just get a status here. And it says, am I already connected? And sure enough, this one is already connected. If I needed to connect to this, so if I wanted to disconnect, so SPO disconnect, and then if I do a status, the way I'm going to connect to it is by saying SPO connect, and then I'm going to pass in the endpoint for the admin part of my SharePoint Online tenant, which is ACIO 365 dev 00-admin.sharepoint.com. Yes, it is. SharePoint ACIO HTTPS.
It's TTPS. Yes, indeed.
There.
Classic.
Exactly. Yeah. Who needs security? I'm a dev. We don't need security. We let the IT pros do that. I'm going to grab, they use the device login for Azure AD, so I'm just going to copy this code, go over to device login. It's going to prompt me to go ahead and log in, which I'm already logged into my tenant. So I'll just paste that in, copy it. Well, it wants me to log in again. ACI 0365 dev 00 on Microsoft.com. And I will save myself with my password manager. And I'm logged in. So now I'm going to go back over here to the command prompt. And if I wait a second, it will come back and say, yes, you are connected. All right, so now what can I end up doing with this? Well, the way that you can do this, you can always ask it for some help and find out what you need to do by just typing in help. And you see we have a couple different things here. We have AAD command groups and SPO command groups. The goal is for this project to ultimately get to full parity, doing things with Excel, doing things with Planner, Office 365 management. If there's an endpoint and PowerShell supports it, we want to support it as well. So jump in, give us a hand. We'd love to have some help. But what's the real use that we could do with this? Well, I'm going to say SPO, and let me just get some help from SPO and see what, or let me say SPO help, or sorry, help SPO, and let's see what it can do. It's going to list out, here's all the different command groups of different things that we can do. So, for example, I can say SPO site list and give me a list of all of my SharePoint site collections. inside of my dev tenant. You see here I'm very busy. Or I can say, give me all the classic sites. I was saying SPO site classic list. And I'll get a few more. There's a couple other things you can do too. I can even say, I can filter it by saying web template, and then say I'm only looking for things using STS#0, which you have to be able to spell template. That's a key prerequisite. There we go. So I only have one team site that I've created here that's using team site template. All of this help, I'm going to show you how you can get some of the help here in just a minute, how I'm knowing all these different commands are available to me. You do see though that when I fat-fingered something just a moment ago, in here in the options, it does tell me all of these different things of stuff that I can do with this. Some of the other things that we can do too is pretty cool. Is I can even say SPO site app catalog, and I can get a list, like say, go ahead, I want to add in an app catalog for a SharePoint site by passing in a URL, say HTTPS, ACIO 365, dev 00, SharePoint.com, sites dev 01. This would add a site collection scoped app catalog to this. So right here, the reason why I'm getting this little error here is because ACIO 365 dev SharePoint.com/sites. It looks like I screwed something up somewhere. That's okay. It does that does actually work. I know that one works because that's the command that I created, and we wouldn't merge it in unless it actually worked. So anyway, yeah, a little error there. I'm not going to dwell on that. I could, but I won't. I don't want to take up too much of anybody else's time. Is there another presentation after this? There's three other things I want to show you that are pretty cool with this. One of the other things you can do is I can also work with the CDN. So I could say something like SPO CDN get. Now I did see someone just say +1 for IntelliSense. I will tell you that one of the things that we do have with this is command line completion. I'm not tabbing through the commands that are available to me, but I could say SPO tab and I would see those different things. I don't have that set up on my machine, but that is something that is set up and available to us with the Office 365 CLI upon installation. I'm doing a dev install and it's not really working on my machine, but for most people it wouldn't be a problem. Here though, you can see back on the screen, I said SPO CDN get. So thanks for pointing that out, so Yannick. So here I say SPO CDN get, and it's saying, responds back with just true, saying, yes, you've got the Office 365 CDN enabled on your tenant. So then I can say, well, let me get some other information about it, like origin list. So give me a list of all the origins, and there's the common origins you would normally see, plus the fourth one, which is the one that I've added for my list as well. Now, as I'm running through these things really quick here, you kind of wonder, like, how do I know all these different commands? Well, of course, I've been using this, because at least I hope I am, because I'm one of the developers on it, but you can also ask it for these things. You can always go to the website and find these different questions or these different commands that are available by going to the commands, and then I can come over and say, look at the app and say, what can we do with the app, like listing out all the different SharePoint apps that have been installed or uploaded to the app catalog. You can see the commands that look like this, or the way I prefer to do it is to live in the CLI. So let me clear my screen up, make it easier to read this, and I'm going to say help SPO app. And what that does is it shows if I start with the first command being help, then as I go deeper in adding more commands, it'll show me more detail about those specific commands. So here I can say help SPO app. I can go a little bit further. Help SPO app add, and it shows me all the details about this one. So you can see here it shows me the syntax, the description, all the different options I can put in, plus all these different remarks. And these remarks are going to mirror what we see on the website as well. In addition, we've also gone through and we've added in documentation for references over to the public Microsoft documentation as well for additional information here. So these are the Office 365 ALM APIs that we can use, or the SharePoint ALM APIs that we can use and post and deploy things to. What's nice about these is that we are saving you from having to work directly with those REST APIs, just like the PowerShell, the PnP PowerShell guys have set up for us as well. The last thing I want to show you before I turn it over to our other presenter is how every command has some additional things that you can do. So let's say I want to go to the CDN, and I normally want to do a CDN get, find out the status here. Well, I can say be verbose about this. Every command supports the verbose command, and it will write out additional logging information to the screen. Or if you really are curious, you can use the debug command, and that will show you all the REST calls with all of the payloads, including all the way down to access tokens that we're submitting over to the endpoint. So you want to see how something is being done for, say, your own programming that you want to do in the REST API, you can throw in the debug command, and you can see that here we're even making a request, in this case here, to the CSOM endpoint that Microsoft is using. Last but not least here, I can even control the way the output comes back. So by default, if I don't put anything on here, I'm always going to get text-based output coming back. But if you are familiar with using a command line and you're, say, like how PowerShell can pipe objects back, I can pipe JSON back and then use another tool, such as a tool called JQ for querying jQuery, to get the data coming back as JSON. In this case here, that wasn't terribly helpful. So why don't we do, how about SPO site list output JSON and get a list of all of my SharePoint sites as a JSON array. And here you go, there's my JSON array. It's a stream that comes straight back, so you could stuff that into a variable if you're into bash scripting or any other kind of command line scripting, and then iterate over that however you see fit. Or you could even just take it and say, pipe it out to desktop file.json. And it'll go through and it'll write that file out to my desktop. So that's everything that I wanted to show about the Office 365 CLI. If you have any questions about it, I'll be answering questions during the next presentation as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Ace. A few things what I wanted to be super clear on this one. There's a few good questions, and then let's talk about this from a user's perspective. Bert, you can start sharing. We don't, so you'll be ready on that side. But now 2 things. Let's be super clear. Why are you introducing this one? There's a PowerShell. No. This is not a replacement. Let's be super clear. The number one use case where actually everything started was Waldek was trying in his Mac to configure Office 365 CDN and was like, I can't. Because the configuration of Office 365 CDN requires what? PowerShell. There's no MDLets or there's no model for Mac to actually configure Office 365 CDN as such. So Waldek implemented a first command. And obviously in a Mac development world, if you're from a Windows side, you might be like, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. Trust me, in a Mac development world, whatever AC is showing makes a lot of sense. And that's a quite typical way how people are then doing this stuff in practice. Now, will this replace the PnP PowerShell? Absolutely not. Will this replace SharePoint Online PowerShell? Absolutely not. That's not the intention of this. It is providing a choice as a cross-platform level choice. Now, will we have in the future cross-platform level PowerShell? Yeah, that could be the case as well. Is that then replacing this one? Well, potentially not, because choice is always good. So this is not meant to be a competition between the things. There are preferences for people how they use these things. Now, there was a good question on the IAM window, which was, hey, will we then see PnP category in this CLI? Well, technically, potentially, you might see some of the same capabilities as in the PnP PowerShell in the CLI, but most likely we will not name them as a PnP. Because again, it doesn't really make that much sense anymore to do that, because the PnP is part of the SharePoint Dev and SharePoint, so it's kind of it might be even misleading. But will you see similar capabilities as in the PnP PowerShell? Yeah, potentially, absolutely. If you need them, you can contribute. Obviously, Irvin is highly welcoming all of the contributions in the PnP PowerShell side as well, if you are more a Windows developer. Now, let's see if we can get sharing to work for Bert, which apparently dropped from the call, which is, it has to be a hardware issue. Now, there was a one question, I'm not sure which of all of these things AC already answered. The multi-authentication, multi-auth. Did you AC already answer on that?
Yes, I did. Basically, the thing for that is that we don't do auth.
Yes.
Just like the PowerShell guys, we hand you off to Azure AD to go log in. That's what the device login is. And once you log in over there, we just keep polling Azure AD and say, did they log in? Did they log in? Give us a token. Give us a token.
And again, that's more natural for the Mac and more natural for the CLIs. The CLI concept itself is not the first time introduced in PnP. There's a lot of CLIs out there, and that's a natural way for doing that stuff there. Again, options. Bert, good to have you back. that was a hardware issue, right? No, network issue or whatever.
Yeah. Skype. I blame Skype. But just checking. Can you guys see a screen now?
Yep.
Because I'm
all good. All good. We can see your screen. Okay.
All right. Finally, it's always the same thing with my Skype. Anyhow,
you're using it wrong, Bert. You're using it wrong.
I did anything possible, but Skype just doesn't like me. All right. Some quick introduction on new things we added in the provisioning engine and in the PnP site core around dealing with the client-side pages. One of the common requests we had is like people want to extract a site with one or more client-side pages, including the depending files. So, for example, here we have a communication site showing the upcoming SharePoint Saturdays. And this is the hero web part that you probably are familiar with, containing 5 images and so some text. And of course, there is also some nice image from the Belgian SharePoint Saturday, the BWork. But okay, looks great, but how can I extract this one and apply it to a new communication site, even outside of this particular tenant? So that's the goal, and that's the thing that I'm going to show you. Now, let's go to my PowerShell. For fun, I'm using a different shell. So this is Azure Cloud Shell, in which I did an install -module SharePoint PnP PowerShell online. It's installed PnP PowerShell in there, and at this point, you can run your PnP PowerShell across any device, because this is just a browser. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to click.
iPad? You mean also
even iPad, yeah, iPhone everywhere. So I'm going to paste some commands. Let me connect to this base site. It should ask me for credentials. Well, it doesn't support Credential Manager in this case, but that's, I think, expected. All right. All right, good. I think we should be in. What I'm going to do next is extract the site. Paste. Hit enter. And while this is extracting, we can, to save some time, jump into the other topic. So the PnP Provisioning Engine is not really a migration tool. We on purpose only extract like a home page. We don't extract list data. And we talked about extensibility providers in the past, so you can write your own extensibility provider to enable such a scenario. Now then, with extracting pages, we had the problem that, okay, you can write it, sure, but you have to essentially copy all the code from PnP in order to kind of make it work. So it was really clumsy and hard to do. And that's why we did some internal refactoring in the PnP Provisioning Engine to make it easier for you to write your extensibility providers. And this extensibility provider is available in GitHub. I just pushed it in today, so it's only in dev branch. And what it does, if I go have a look at the actual code really quick. Let's go over here. So it is a typical extensibility provider inheriting the interface. But what this one does, which is the thing that I want to show, is extract across all the client-side pages of your site and then extract them all in a template. So the magic part is here. So this is the new thing that we added in the PnP Provisioning Engine. There is some, the PnP sites core library. We did some refactoring, which makes it easier for you to just consume this extract client-side page method for your own extensibility providers. All right, let's flip back to our PowerShell, which is done. So let's have a look at what we got. So you see in here that it added a fab call XML and that it added a site assets folder. So let's go into site assets. So why did it add site assets? Let's see what we have here. Site pages. And we see images. Isn't that weird? Like we extracted homepage, but we get images. And that's one of the new things. So we did essentially do this get PnP provisioning template. We set specific branding files, which triggered the extraction of all the dependent images. So essentially, the engine is clever enough to see that there are 5 images here. If these 5 images live in the current site, we will extract them as well. So if we then quickly do the opposite, let's create sites. I'm going to go over here. Let's see. Let's paste the command. I'm going to create a new communication site, which we will connect to once it's done. And then we're going to apply the template just to see the end results. All right. We have a site, paste, let's connect to it. Like this. Is correct? Yes. My password. Right. We are connected. And let's apply this template. Here, what's that? No, demo failed, but maybe because I'm in the wrong folder. Sorry. Let's go back. Let's go back. Now we have this one over here, and boom. Now it should work. All right. Being applied. It's applying. Let's in the meanwhile open up our target site. So you see it's applying the list instance, creating the site assets list. So for communication site, you need to create site assets list as part of the template. And then it should now really quickly create the actual, it's uploading the files. So we exported those files, they get uploaded automatically, they get referenced. To enable this scenario, this is the template that we extracted. Really quick here, you see, for example, this guy. Let's zoom in. So we have a new token file unique ID that allows to kind of have references to files as part of the template. So all works kind of automatically for you. And the net result is that the apply finished. So let's see if it really did the work. So this is the new site, and hopefully we see our same images again. And yes, we do. Great. And do we see the beer? Yeah, you even see nice beer. I think this is nice screen to stop with, Vesa, with some nice beer.
Yes. So there was a question quickly, and we'll flip on the slides. After that, we can have a look on the beer for a while. Will images get extracted when exported to XML instead of PnP zip file, or what's the? And in this case, it was extracted as XML, so the images were still extracted, right?
If you extract to a PnP file, it's the same thing. So the images will end up in a PnP file. Everything that you extract ends up in a PnP file. And how does it work? When you extract, web parts have properties, have JSON properties, which determine the behavior of the web part. Essentially, there's a generic code that will try to figure out, like, is there a reference to a file based on a unique ID? We are trying to find that file inside the current site. If you find the file, we grab it. So the logic is not just for first-party web parts. It can also already work for your third-party web parts as well, depending a bit on how you reference files. So if you reference files based on the GUID, the file unique ID, at that point, it should work for you as well.
Yeah. So it really comes down on how like you said, how the properties are defined in the third-party web parts. And to be fair, we haven't actually documented that, right, yet. So we need to get there and probably give that as a guidance for third-party web part. So they should follow the same model as the first-party web part. So therefore, we can then extract these things out as well. But this is really, really highly useful if you need to replay, in quotes, replay an existing modern site or a classic site as well, actually, but the modern site in this case, with an existing web parts for which have dependencies on the images or other assets in the site. So super clear and a great implementation. Thank you, Bert, for that. And that was part of the February release, wasn't it? So
yes, absolutely.
Cool. Excellent. But I think we're hitting the hour, so therefore, learn, reuse, share our SharePoint PnP, let's say, quotes and AKMS SPFx. There was a discussion earlier today, potentially, that, hey, what will happen for that URL? It will be most likely redirected sooner or later to the new SharePoint developer portal, where you will, though, see all of the SharePoint PnP assets and everything else, because the SharePoint dev equals SharePoint PnP, SharePoint PnP equals SharePoint dev, and dev community, there isn't really no difference. It's the same people and same group and same process how we do the stuff. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paula, for your great demo around the upcoming WebAPI and graph scopes functionality. We have documentation queued up. I was just actually doing quick reviews on the documents when Bert was doing his demo. That will be queued up quite soon and available whenever we get the tenants and the capabilities enabled in a tenant. So things will happen within hours or days, so super, super close. Thank you, AC, for a great demo on the Office 365 CLI. Great stuff as well. And again, it's great to have options also if you are on a Mac platform to do those operations in there as well. Now, we'll talk about more and more on those things in the future as well. Bert, thank you, great demo on the provisioning. Absolutely brilliant stuff, because that helps across the platform, well, at least in the Windows platform, because that's currently supported in the PnP PowerShell and in the CSAM extension to do provisioning of those sites in a consistent way. But thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We did have more than 100 attendees today as the peak number, which is super cool. The attendee number seems to be growing, and it's great to see that you are feeling that the material is useful, even though apparently Skype is having a sorry time because it cannot display the presentation. Interesting. But thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll have the video recording available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. So if you want to share some of the stuff what we went through today for your colleagues or friends or your customers, the video will be out in AKMS SPDev videos within 24 hours. And you can actually have the recording then from there. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and keep the feedback coming. And thank you for joining. Bye-bye.